The person that has broken this story, I think it is the most damning evidence to date, and we have had a lot of it. John Solomon joins us now with The Hill. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so there is an email chain that basically corroborates that everybody in the FBI, DOJ, that there was no corroboration of any of the information in the dossier, and quite the opposite. They even had their own doubts.
Yeah, let me tell you what specifically what sources are saying. What they're saying is that there's an email chain that only has become known recently to members of Congress that shows that the FBI was aware there were intelligence community concerns about the validity, accuracy, reliability of the Steele dossier. And that is so important because those concerns enter the FBI leadership chain before the FISA is given to the court and before it's approved. And we know one of the people on that email chain, we don't know how much he's on there yet, but is James Comey, who signs one of the FISA warrants. So the head of the FBI is on an email chain where people are aware and being alerted that the intelligence community has concerns about elements of the Steele dossier. That's important because the FISA regulations require, if you're going to use the Steele dossier as corroborating evidence for a warrant, you have to have confirmed it was verified, it's accurate. And we now know there were concerns raised about the accuracy, reliability prior to the dossier being used in that capacity. The second thing is we know from the release of the redacted version of the FISA that they used a Yahoo News article as separate corroboration to bolster the dossier. Well, we know that Steele and Yahoo talked, right? Michael Isikoff and Steele talked before the publication of the article. We learned that, but it's never been clear, did the FBI know prior to the FISA that Steele and Yahoo had talked? We now know, according to this email chain, the sources who are familiar with it, that the FBI was aware of Steele's contacts with the media before they went to the FISA court. If both of those things are true, if the email chain shows both of those things, it would provide prima facie evidence that the FBI did not meet its obligations to the FISA court. And people who've seen it, who are talking about it, Devin Nunes, talk about this as some of the most damning evidence of wrongdoing yet.
In other words, wouldn't that be by every definition? Let's use Rod Rosenstein's own words. And by the way, can we throw those over to TV so they have it? Because we're going to get into this in more detail tonight. When he said, well, if FISA application, if it's an affidavit, and if a career law enforcement officer puts his name to it, he is certifying with his full faith and confidence that it is fair and true and accurate, or there are severe consequences. I think I captured his tone, cadence when he says it.
I think so. There's something we ought to talk about there, because you know what? There was a moment this past summer that has stuck in my memory, and I wish we could follow up on it in the next sworn testimony by Rod Rosenstein. But Jim Jordan basically got Rod Rosenstein to 1 inch from admitting he never read the FISA application that he signed. If that is true, Rod Rosenstein failed his own description of his obligations. If Rod Rosenstein did not fully read the fourth renewal application, which is the one he signed, that is going to constitute.
Well, hang on. If he didn't read it, did he really not read it? Or maybe he did read it, and maybe now that he knows, because at the point at which we're discussing this, we now know that the bulk of information to obtain the FISA is the phony dossier that even Christopher Steele doesn't stand by. So my question is, maybe he actually did know. Maybe he actually, and he's just saying it because that's the better of two bad choices.
Yeah, they're both bad choices because the court and the law will not look favorably on the Deputy Attorney General under either circumstance. If he knew they were wrong and he submitted it, he has significant culpability and he dishonored the Justice Department. And if he didn't read it and do his obligation and sign it, he didn't fulfill his obligation and he dishonored the Justice Department.
Doesn't this prove, though, that they were willing to do anything, including not follow procedure, protocol, and the actual law itself, and they willingly lied and committed a fraud upon the court to obtain a warrant to spy illegally on an American citizen? Isn't that what we're really talking about?
We are. And I think, Sean, the other, maybe 2 weeks ago, just before Thanksgiving, you had Devin Nunes on. And for the first time, I heard him describe the insurance policy as something than what's been speculated in the media in the past. And that is, the insurance policy was all the evidence they were going to gather to bulk up the Steele dossier. And I don't know if you remember what Devin said in that interview. You did a great job interviewing me. He said, when people find out what the insurance policy is, which was a bunch of evidence put together to bulk up a very weak dossier, they're going to be just as ashamed as they are of the dossier. It's just as problematic and concerning. And you know where a lot of that evidence was submitted for the first time to the FISA court, that bulk up the questionable Steele dossier? It was on the FISA application that Rod Rosenstein submitted, not the three prior, but the one he submitted. And I think on your show, Devin said that there's information in that fourth FISA that wasn't in any of the other FISAs. And it's as troubling as the Steele dossier itself. I can't wait to the day we get to see that. When the president declassifies that, we're going to be able to make our own judgments.
We thought the president would do this before the election. He decided not to. Now, he did give us some insight since then when the question came to him, well, what are you going to do about all these Democrats that are pledging to, start endless investigation after investigation? He said he's got information that he's holding in his back pocket that is going to show their corruption. Now, I kind of like the strategic, tactical thinking of it, but I don't know what's worse. I'd prefer, I think, to see what is in those 302s and the Gang of Eight and those FISA applications, especially in light of your report.
Right, yeah. I think, it's interesting. Donald Trump always has a lot of fun on Twitter, right? But I think the real reason, my reporting, I've done a lot of reporting on, remember, it was the interview with President Trump that I had back in September where he mentioned he was going to declassify it, and he disclosed for the first time he hadn't even read the documents. He was trusting the people in Congress and their judgment, and he would release them without reading them himself, so he didn't tamper with the investigation. Here's what my reporting indicates on why the president hasn't done that yet. He hasn't done it because his lawyers believe it could be construed as an effort at obstructing the investigation in its final phases. It is winding down by all accounts. And the greatest exoneration the president can claim is that the investigation just ended, and guess what? I wasn't charged, just like I told you. There was no collusion. That is the most important thing. Plus, it ends an investigation that has tormented all of America on all political aisles. I think the president is waiting for that moment, and then I believe all my reporting indicates he will be prepared at that moment to start to unleash these documents, and will then begin to go from the phase of he's been exonerated to let's hold accountable the people who put this charade upon the American people.
Quick break. We'll have more with our John Solomon now. He's going to be breaking other news tonight that is also as big as last night's reveal. That's coming up 9 Eastern, Hannity on Fox News. Quick break. Right back. We'll continue straight ahead. All right, as we continue, John Solomon with The Hill reporting with us. I guess what's so amazing that the FBI and the DOJ and now we know they knew that it was at best they never corroborated. Now we have an email chain that proves they never corroborated the Steele dossier, the bulk of information for the FISA applications. There are crimes in play here for individuals. This is we're going to put people in jail for lying to the FBI repeatedly and process crimes. These are real crimes. There really was not only an effort to prevent Trump from becoming president, but also worse than that. They have an insurance policy to destroy him should he win, which we're now discovering. But you also have a story you're breaking tonight. Can you give us a headline?
Well, there are two questions in this whole investigation that particularly conservatives have been most concerned about, right? The first is, was this a railroad? Was this an effort to delegitimize President Trump's election victory by creating a bogus election scandal, or election collusion scandal? And I think, we know from the House Intelligence Committee report, we know from what the Senate Intelligence Committee chairman just said recently, still no collusion 2.5 years later. I think we're pretty certain that collusion will not be proven. We should wait for Bob Mueller's last report before we make a final determination. But I think the first concern is if it wasn't a real investigation, were abuses committed to create the appearance of a real investigation, and that's what we just talked about. The second question that comes up, because they're really twinned in the consciousness not only of the American public, but in the FBI agents who worked both cases, was the treatment of the Clintons. Did the Clintons get a disparate treatment from that of President Trump? If there was so much
so in other words,
we would go ahead.
We're going to get the second part. We now know the part that
they will deal with the Clintons. Absolutely. Yes, you interpreted exactly what I said directly. We're going to learn tonight about some evidence that the Trump Justice Department has had for more than a year about the Clinton Foundation, and I think it will be interesting. It involves whistleblowers. It involves...
Let's explain why a whistleblower's home was raided recently.
It's a different whistleblower. Yep, different whistleblower. Though I think at the end of the day...
I'm going to have to run, but... Yeah, I think... All right, so John Solomon will be breaking more news on the Clinton Foundation tonight. and we'll follow this report. The FBI knew that this information was phony, and they used it anyway for FISA applications. Unbelievable. All right, that's all happening at 9.